council stipulate, please?
Yes, Judge.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. We continue this morning with the state's witness, Ms. Roy.
She's being brought in now, Your Honor.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Roy. You may be seated.
Thank you. Good morning.
I'm going to need to use this. Good morning again.
Good morning.
So we're doing our own AV information again. So yesterday when we left off, I was about to ask you about 88-1, which was the garbage bag that was tied up. Is that correct?
It's knotted.
Knotted. Okay. But this is the item that you examined, correct?
Correct.
Now, I note that from your report that you did split some of the work from 88-1 between yourself and your colleague Anita Vonis, correct?
There was, in the submission 88, I did not do all the work. Anita did some of the work.
Did you undo the knot on this bag?
No, I didn't undo it.
Did someone else undo it? Did it arrive in this format as we see in this particular image, which is part of my defense exhibit R? Or was it number 408? Or was it in a different condition?
It was knotted. This is a photograph of how I received it.
Okay, so you don't know if anybody had already opened it up, turned it around, retied it, or anything like that
No, I don't.
before you got it?
That's correct.
Were you made aware that this was an item found in a garbage pail, a receptacle, with a large number of other items that were not inside it?
I was aware that it was collected from the garbage in Hartford on the Albany Avenue area. I was aware of that.
Okay. And you were aware that there were a number of items exposed in the receptacle in and around this bag when it was obtained, correct?
I'm aware that there were other items. I don't know what you mean by exposed.
As opposed to being inside that bag.
I just know that that bag came in submission 88.
All right, so you don't know the condition it was in and what it was found amongst when it was retrieved by the state police. Is that a fair
That's
statement?
correct.
Okay. And you indicated that one of the things you do in the lab is you have to be very careful. You wear gloves, you wear a smock or some kind of lab coat, correct?
Correct.
And is that part of the reason to make sure you don't contaminate one item with another, right?
Well, that's the reason we are covered up is that, A, we don't want to get any of our biological material on the evidence, And of course, we don't want to expose ourselves to any hazards that may be on the evidence.
Do you also switch gloves between each item you look at?
Oh, of course, and we switch gloves, at least I do, often while examining something.
In other words, that's so that you don't contaminate an item or a portion of an item from something you had already just looked at, correct?
Correct. I mean, we clean the whole area, we clean all our utensils, everything gets very well cleaned and disinfected with Clorox.
And you indicated, Clorox is a substance that will get rid of many of the biological materials you look at?
Well, by Clorox, I should have said bleach. Clorox is a brand of bleach. Yes, it's what we use to clean down all our working areas. Yes.
But my question was, do you use that because it eliminates a lot of the residual biological matter
Yes.
that might be on the
Yes,
counter
exactly.
or
Yes.
on your gloves or anywhere else, right?
Yes, we just discard in a biological hazard. We don't clean our gloves off, we just discard them.
You indicated also that your concern, one of your concerns is not putting some of your own biological excretion, if you will, for want of a better word, onto the items you're examining, correct?
Correct, I wouldn't want my, be coughing on an item or sneezing on an item.
Or even getting some of your skin cells on it, right?
Correct. I'm just the basic of not getting anything of my biological material onto a piece of evidence.
Fair enough. And if you take off gloves, I assume you do it away from the item itself, right?
Yes, and I'm turning them inside out as I'm taking them off.
Is it, from your training and experience, can some skin cells actually shed just by flipping the gloves off, the latex gloves, from that action alone?
That I don't know.
Okay. But you, in any event, it's part of your protocol to move away from the item, remove the gloves and make them inside out and throw them away, correct?
Well, I have a hazardous waste container that's not sitting right next to the item I'm examining. It's over there on the side of my lab bench. And I'm over there taking off the gloves. So yes, in general, I'm taking the gloves off, not on top of the item I'm examining. That's correct.
Okay. So I also understand that when going back to my question about Ms. Vonis, you acted as the technical reviewer of the work that she did on this item 88-1, correct?
I examined this 88-1.
No. My question is, you said you split the work in relation to items from 88-1. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, she examined some of the items in 88, in the submission 88. I believe she examined 88-3, not 88-1.
Okay.
She examined 88-3, then a knotted plastic bag. I also examined a knotted plastic bag, but that was 88-2.
Okay, so I'm just putting this up for a moment. This is again from my Exhibit R. I'm not going to ask you, we've been through this. This is, says page 184. It's my page 485 for these purposes, but this is the same form, the blood and touch evidence examination worksheet that we've talked about yesterday, correct?
Correct.
And again, if we look at the KM column and the KMOT, this is the screening column. It says NT for the first two, correct?
Correct.
Positive for KM on the third and fifth, correct?
Correct.
And a weak one on the sixth, right?
Correct.
But if we go to the next column, there was no human blood confirmatory test done on those items, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Did you observe inside this bag a green and yellow sponge?
No.
Was there another black bag, garbage bag, that you saw and at least were the technical reviewer of that Ms. Vonis opened?
if I could explain something. So when the submission was originally opened, 88, there was a number of items within 88. So the latent print examiner itemized all those items that were found in 88. So, and then he individually wrapped those items and put a barcode, the laboratory barcode with the item number on it. And that was how we could, the work got distributed without us having to exchange the mother package submission and us each going in and out of that submission. So I did not see that sponge come out of the submission 88. Now, I did review, as a technical reviewer, Anita's report that she wrote up of the sponge. That's correct.
Okay, so let me just break that down a bit. 88 was identified as whatever came in toto from that particular garbage receptacle from Albany Avenue. Is that a fair statement?
I don't know that. I know that a number of items were placed into submission 88, but whether the garbage receptacle, that part I don't know.
Okay, let me ask this a different way then. You did not break it up into 88-1, 88-2, 88-3, or any other 88-other number, correct? Somebody else did that.
That's correct.
Did you, and the reason I'm asking this is, was there more than one green and yellow sponge recovered from item 88?
Looking at my notes here, I see that there was one sponge that was located in 88. I don't have any other notes that there was another sponge.
You do not have any other note about that?
Just that 88-1-1 was a sponge that was found in the non-damaged bag, which was the two bags which were taped together, which was referred to as 88-1. I could check something else that I have here.
The reason I'm asking this is, I want to make sure that we're not confusing two different items that may have been retrieved at the same time. That's why I'm asking.
I only have notes on that there was, within submission 88, there was one sponge, which was itemized as 88-1-1. Okay,
so you just indicated that it was an 88-1, not 88-2, correct?
It's 88-1-1.
Did you at least, you testified that you examined 88-1, correct?
Yes, but it was already removed
Oh, okay.
because Kevin, or the latent print examiner, Kevin Parisi, had taken the contents of 88, like I tried to explain earlier, itemized everything and packaged everything separately. So therefore, I didn't have to go get 88, submission 88 to examine something in 88. I could just get the individually packaged and labeled 88-1. And then when I wanted to examine the piece of cardboard, which came from 88-3, it was already in a separate packaging with a label on it.
Okay. So I just want to show you, I know that maybe you haven't seen this picture. This is from States Exhibit 42, folder. It's cut off, but it says 3 Albany in green. And I'm just going to ask you, are you able to tell us, you see there's a number 502 on a yellow sheet of paper here. Oh, no, you don't see that. Excuse me. All right, if you now could look at this screen, you see there's a number 502 next to what appears to be a green and yellow item next to the word green in this image. This is 7-275 in States Exhibit 42. You see that?
I see a sponge on the screen, yes.
Did you yourself, and this is what, did you yourself ever examine that particular sponge that we see in this image here?
No, I never examined a sponge in this case.
Okay, and I want to be clear. Do you know whether there were two sponges recovered at the same time or in the same trash receptacle?
I don't know.
Okay. I just don't want to lose any of the exhibits, Your Honor. You also testified yesterday that you did some testing on a swab or a cutting from a cover of a car seat. Is that correct?
I did examine a cutting from a car seat, yes.
Could you just tell the jury, what did you do with that cutting?
I'm going to refer to my notes.
Of course.
So it was a cutting of black upholstery type fabric with a foam backing, and there was an area on the black side that was circled.
When you did this cutting, did you have the entire car seat there?
I did not do this cutting. This was what I received as the evidence, a cutting.
Did you have a picture of the seat that it had come from?
No.
You did have some communication, did you not, with a Detective Riley about which side this cutting came from?
I might have, I don't recall. I'd have to find, if I could find that.
Would reviewing a email between, that you may have been
Yes.
involved in, assist you in
Yes,
in refreshing your memory?
yes, it would.
All right, I'm just gonna have this marked for ID, please. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Showing you what has been marked as Exhibit F for identification, I'm just going to ask you to review this two-page document, and I'll just note, you recognize your initials on there?
Actually, that's my coworker's
All right, do
initials.
you recognize your name on there?
Yes.
Okay, so you just look at this, you can, it's just, take as much time as you need, and when you're done, let me know, and I'll ask you a question that refreshes your recollection.
Okay, thank you.
Does that refresh your recollection as to whether you were privy to any communication about the location of the seat being either left or the passenger or the driver's side?
Should I read what it says here?
No, I'm asking if it refreshes your recollection that you would receive that communication.
Oh, yes, this is an email that I received, yes.
Okay, so I'll take that.
Okay.
Thank you. So having had your memory refreshed, do you recall that you were unable, that the police were unable to determine whether the seat cutting that you received was from the passenger or the driver's side?
That's correct.
You said it had a sponge rubber backing, correct?
A foam backing.
Foam backing, a soft foam? Is that what you meant by that?
Like upholstery, that little thin layer of foam? Yes.
Okay. And upholstery foam is absorbent, isn't it?
As is cloth, yes.
There was no, you did not see any visible sign of any staining of any sort on it, correct?
On this entire piece, no.
There was none at all, right?
Not on either side.
So if somebody had identified it as a blood-like stain, you saw nothing to support that, correct?
Visually, no. With my unaided eye, no.
And you looked at both the front upholstery side, right?
Yes,
And the back side with the foam on it, right?
that's correct.
Just a moment. Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Redirect, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yesterday you were asked on cross-examination about whether or not you had performed confirmatory blood tests on a number of swabs in this case. Do you recall that line of questioning?
Yes.
And I believe during your answer you indicated that the information received from the DNA unit would be a lot more individualized.
Yes.
Could you just explain to the jury what you meant by that?
Well, if I did a test, confirmatory test for blood, it would either say human blood was present or that human blood was indicated. Now, if they did receive or obtain a DNA profile from that evidence, then there's, I'm sure, as you've probably already heard from the DNA analyst, that there's genetic markers that are identified, and then they can be compared with the same tests that are run on a known sample of someone's swabbing of their cheek or their blood. And you can compare those, and that's what I mean by individualizing.
In other words, if you had done a confirmatory blood test, it would have told you human blood is indicated, but DNA can actually give information about who may have contributed to a profile. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so the more confirmatory tests that you do, the less DNA that there is to analyze. Is that
Objection
fair to say?
leading.
Well, this line of questioning was developed yesterday, and so it is not leading to the extent that the state is essentially testifying. It stems from that line of questioning concerning the amount of DNA and the interpretation of the sample once the DNA unit analyzes it. So overruled.
Yeah, if I'm sending them less sample, then potentially I'm reducing the amount of DNA that's in that sample, that's going to DNA. And I don't know how that's gonna affect their overall result or interpretation. That's why I say, latent prints does their examination before I do. Because if I swapped over a latent print, maybe I would remove enough information where that latent print was no longer useful. So that's why we're aware of what other sections that we work with, how we want to best utilize the evidence available.
You mentioned on cross-examination that you use bleach to clean your bench area in between each item. Why use bleach?
Because it destroys biological material. We make up fresh 10% bleach every day, and we constantly are cleaning. I would say anybody interested in forensics, you better be prepared to clean. It's just part of the job. Clean your work area, clean what you're using, and just everything has to be maintained clean.
So if things are bleached or other cleaning products are applied, or a car goes through a car wash, for example, that could destroy potential biological material, is that correct?
It depends on the type of cleaning agent that you're using.
Sure.
Yeah, bleach being the most prevalent one that is used in forensic labs to clean.
If I could just have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
Nothing further.
Thank you.
Just a quick follow-up, if I may. Have you ever heard of a car wash using bleach to clean a car?
I don't know anything about car washes.
Or what detergents or
No,
what kind of cloths they use?
that's not any part of my
Fair enough.
knowledge.
And in answer to a couple of the other questions about not wanting to, do you recall just saying that the reason you didn't do a lot of testing is you didn't want to maybe diminish or reduce the amount of any potential DNA that for the DNA section, correct?
That's correct. If
But
I
that,
use-
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go on. I'm finished.
Oh. But that includes touch DNA, that is skin cells, right?
That's correct, yes.
It includes, you mentioned even a fingerprint. It might diminish the amount of skin cells in a fingerprint ridge, correct?
What I was giving an example of was saying that if I swapped away part of a latent print, that would give the latent print examiner maybe less information to identify a latent print. I was just trying to make kind of a comparison, that's why we try to work with the other units in order to maximize or utilize, get the most information that we can out of a piece of evidence. I wasn't talking about, I guess I did make myself clear then.
All right, but what I want to do to be clear though is when you're talking about wanting to reduce, to prevent the reduction of any potential DNA source, that didn't mean that all the items that you did not do a confirmatory test were blood, correct?
If I did a screening test, it just indicates the presence of blood. It doesn't determine that blood is there.
When you say it indicates the potential presence of blood, correct?
It indicates the presence of blood. That's what it indicates. We're not saying blood is there, but we're saying it gives a positive test for a screening test for blood, and that's the way we describe the result. It indicates the presence of blood.
It's a presumptive test, as you said yesterday, correct?
No, I said it was a screening test.
screening
We
test.
don't use the word presumptive in the lab.
All right, but you also testify that other things besides blood show a positive reaction to KM,
I'm just going to
correct?
object at this point, it's outside the scope.
Well, this line of questioning has not yet become circular, but the clarifications are fair, overruled.
Should I repeat my question?
Oh, yes, plant peroxidases also will give a positive result with the screening test for blood. That's because,
That's fine. I
Oh,
guess I
okay.
don't, that's fine.
all right,
I just didn't want to give let the jury have the false impression that just because there was a K&M screening for blood that was positive, that meant there was
Well,
blood
that's
in the
not,
sample.
that's not a
Object
question,
to the form of
Attorney
the question.
Schoenhorn. Stating that I just want to give the jury an explanation is not a question.
I will rephrase the question. To be clear, you're not saying that just because there was a positive reaction to a KM screening test, that in fact sample contained human blood, correct?
well, definitely not saying that. It says, I'm saying that,
That's fine. You're not saying what I just said, correct?
right. It's
No,
a-
that's fine. No further questions.
You were asked on cross-examination just now about car washes using bleach. I wanted to ask you, could vacuuming a surface potentially remove biological evidence from that surface?
Your Honor, that's definitely outside the scope of
Well,
cross.
now we're talking about what goes on at the car wash. Again, the term car wash doesn't open every door. Sustained.
I have nothing further, Judge.
Nothing else, sir.
Well, you may step down.
Thank you.
Your Honor, the state calls Anita Vonis.
Oh, this is what you did yesterday, correct? Yeah, no. Let me just look at this. This is an updated version because I have this. Oh, that's the one you did. Okay. Just look.
You could please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or solemnly and sincerely affirm, as the case may be, that this evidence that you should, I'm sorry, I'll start over. Do you solemnly swear or solemnly and sincerely affirm, as the case may be, that the evidence you shall give concerning this case shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, or upon penalty of perjury?
I do.
Please state your name and spell it for the record.
Anita Vonis, Anita Valonis.
Thank you.
Mr. Lonis, you may be seated.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Ms. Valonis, would you just indicate to the jury where you were working in 2019?
I was employed at the State of Connecticut Forensic Science Laboratory.
And have you since retired?
I have.
When did you retire?
April 1st, 2022.
What was your position at the laboratory prior to retirement?
I was a Forensic Science Examiner 2 in the Forensic Biology Unit.
And how many years did you work at the state laboratory?
I started first at the Department of Public Health, State of Connecticut. I worked there for 12 years, doing approximately what I am doing now when I retired. From 1999 until my retirement, I worked at the State Forensic Lab in Meriden.
And what were your responsibilities at the state forensic lab?
In the Forensic Biology Unit, I was tasked with examining evidence for the presence of blood and body fluid, as well as taking samples for touch or wearer DNA analysis. I also was able to be educated by the FBI laboratory, and I examined human hairs for the lab as well.
What type of educational and training background do you have in doing these things?
I have a Bachelor's of Science from St. Joseph College, which is now University of St. Joseph in West Hartford, Connecticut. I majored in biology chemistry with a Bachelor's of Science degree. I also have a Master's of Science from the University of New Haven. I have a concentration in criminalistics. I've also performed other continuing education courses throughout my career.
And do you have any specific training with respect to hair and fiber analysis?
Yes, the FBI, I was trained by the FBI. I spent 4 months at the FBI laboratory in Quantico, Virginia, where they trained me as their own. I learned how to examine hairs, identify hairs, determine what body area a hair came from, and also do microscopical hair comparisons.
And since you've retired, you're being compensated for your preparation and time here, is that correct?
Yes,
Now, I want to direct your attention to laboratory case number 19-002984. Did you perform analysis under that case number?
I did.
And would it be fair to say that you split the responsibilities of the forensic biology unit with Ms. Christine Roy in this particular case?
Yes,
So in some instances, you analyzed certain evidence, and in other instances, she analyzed certain evidence. Is that fair to say?
yes.
And can you just tell us sort of your personal process or normal process when you receive a piece of evidence?
When I receive a piece of evidence, either through the evidence receiving unit, another person in the laboratory, or from a storage location in the laboratory, I proceed by documenting the packaging by photographing it. I would then garb myself appropriately wearing a hairnet, a face mask, a lab coat, disposable paper sleeves, and gloves, which I change often. I lay down a piece of brown paper on the bench top that I've previously cleaned and start to examine the evidence. I open the bag, pour the evidence onto my paper. I photograph it as I examine it, and I look for the presence of any blood, in this case, or any hair-like fibers that I might come upon. I would package certain things separately, but for example, the hair-like fibers to be examined later on. And then I begin to test any reddish-brown stains that might appear on this item of evidence with a chemical screening test for the presence of blood, and choose the appropriate samples that I believe should be sent to the DNA unit.
Just approaching with what has been marked for identification purposes as states 110. Ms. Velonis, is this your curriculum vitae?
Yes, it is.
Judge, I move it in.
No objection.
States 110 admitted as full.
Could we have an exhibit number, please?
110.
Just returning that to the clerk. Your Honor, at this time I have what has been pre-marked for identification as Exhibit 111, which is a paper copy of thumbnail photographs, and 111A, which is a DVD with the name Anita Vonis on it. I move these in as full exhibits at this time.
Could I just compare it to my copy, please?
Gave you this opportunity earlier, but yes.
I don't need even a large disc, I just want to. I have no objection.
That's 111 and 111A
Yes, sir.
admitted as full.
And Your Honor, similar to yesterday, I would just ask for the court's permission to be able to proceed with the examination seated so that I can see the screen a little bit better.
Yes.
Ms. Velonis, you authored a number of reports in this case, is that correct?
Yes.
Just ask to be marked for identification purposes. I'm approaching what has been marked for identification as exhibits 113 through 116. I'm just going to hand these to the witness. Ms. Vonis, if you need to refer to these at any point, they're available to you. Although I know you brought your own notes, is that correct?
That's correct.
I hear, that was for identification. I don't know if I heard the,
Well, they're marked for identification.
right.
Ms. Vonis, you indicated that you examined physical evidence under that case number. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And we've learned, well, the laboratory, when evidence is submitted, gives it its own submission number. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so that submission number does not necessarily match a police agency exhibit number. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
Okay. You, however, refer to things by the submission number at the lab. Is that correct?
Yes,
And then subsequently, there could be even sub-submissions under that number. Is that fair to say also?
yes.
Okay. Your Honor, I'm just going to publish a stipulation between the parties, States Exhibit 103, specifically paragraph 6.
And would you read it slowly, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
State Police Exhibit 502E, seized from Hartford by Sergeant Kevin Duggan on May 31st, 2019, and identified as one pair of black husky gloves contained within State Police Exhibit 502, seized from the scene, corner of Albany Avenue and Green Street, Hartford, Connecticut, was subsequently submitted to the Division of Scientific Services and designated as submission number 62. Ms. Vonis, I'd like to talk to you now about submission number 62. Permission to publish exhibit, Your Honor. And I'm just going to open the folder on this disc entitled State Police 502E Lab Submission Number 62. Firstly, what was submission number 62?
Submission number 62 consisted of a pair of black Husky brand gloves.
And what condition were they in when you saw them?
They were intact.
And did you do a visual examination of the gloves?
I did.
And did you notice anything on the gloves?
I did.
What did you notice?
I noticed reddish brown type staining on each of these gloves.
Were the gloves given different designations? In other words, was one glove given a submission number and another glove given a different submission number?
Yes.
And can you just explain to the jury which glove was given which submission number?
So this was submission number 62. And I designated the left glove as 62-1 and the right glove I designated as 62-2.
And I'm just going to display the first photograph in this folder, Lab 62 1S1. Ms. Vonis, can you see that on the screen in front of you?
I can.
And can you just tell the jury what we're looking at here?
We are looking at sub-item number 62-1, the left glove.
And can you just explain what, if any, action you took with respect to this particular glove?
Yes. The first thing I did was I collected wearer DNA from the interior of this glove. I took a sterile swab, applied some sterile water, purified water, and rubbed the inside palm area of this glove I preserved that sample and I labeled that as sample number 62-1S2, where DNA.
And you're referring to it as where DNA. Does it have any other names?
It can also touch DNA. They're both fairly synonymous.
Okay. And specifically, I want to direct your attention now to 61S1. Was that a swabbing of the interior palm side?
It's actually 62-1S1. It's a little cramped on the
Oh, excuse
photograph. I apologize for that, but that is in fact a designation of where I took the sample of the swabbing of the left glove interior palm side.
And on the bottom of this photograph, there's an arrow with a notation. Is that the general area where you took the swabbing?
The arrow is designating the interior of the glove. Clearly, I can't point to the actual area, but it was meant to imply that I swabbed the interior of this glove on the palm side.
And so because you tested, or excuse me, because that swabbing was for where DNA, as you call it, you did not do any or screening blood tests or anything like that on that particular swab.
That's correct.
I want to direct your attention now to 62-1S2. Can you just indicate to the jury, this is photograph lab 62-1S2 and 62-1S3, just beginning with the top photograph, and I'll zoom a little bit. Can you just indicate for the jury what we're looking at in the photo on the left-hand side of the top half of the photograph?
Yes, the image on the top left of this document is a photograph of the back side of the glove, the Husky logo on the back side of the glove.
And did you notice anything on that particular logo?
Yes, I noticed some reddish-brown staining.
And because you noticed reddish-brown staining, did you take any action with respect to that area?
I did.
What did you do?
I tested a portion of that reddish-brown staining with a chemical screening test for the presence of blood. I obtained a positive result indicating the presence of blood.
And then with respect to 62-1S3, and again, just to be clear, this is all still with the left glove, is that correct?
That's correct.
And
I'd
we'll-
also like to add a little bit more to that photograph, if
Sure.
I may. So the sample that I did collect, I labeled as 62-1S2. I erroneously labeled it on the photograph here as 61-1S2, but clearly it is 62-1S2. There is no sample in this case that is a 61-1S2.
And now directing your attention to the bottom of the photograph.
The bottom left image on this page documents two things. The Velcro closure, in my opinion, was very clean and very new looking. There was no trace material or hair-like fibers embedded in the Velcro closure. I also tested an area of this glove with a chemical screening test for the presence of blood. That is designated as the red positive sign on this photo. The positive screening test for the presence of blood indicates the presence of blood. I did not collect a sample from that area. I just noted that there was also reddish-brown staining in that area.
So with respect to 62-1S3, which was another swabbing that you took, what area was swabbed there?
That was the strap-like closure at the base or opening of the glove. I noted reddish-brown staining on the smaller Husky logo on that strap, and with also the stitching on that strap, as well as what I call the ribbing of that strap that allows it to bend easily. Reddish-brown staining was noted in all of those areas. I tested portions of this reddish-brown staining and obtained a positive result indicating the presence of blood.
And just to be clear, you did screening tests for blood, is that correct?
That's correct.
You did not yourself do any confirmatory tests for blood, is that correct?
That's correct.
And were all of these swabbings that you took from item 62-1 submitted for DNA analysis?
They were. From the strap, I labeled that sample 62-1S3. Staining on left glove, areas on exterior wrist closure.
And I take it that the same process with the swabs in that you cut the swabs and put them in a tube and prepare them for the DNA analysis, is that fair to say?
That's very fair to say.
Now, with respect to the right glove, or what you designated as 62-2, I'm just going to pull up a photograph of that. Is this photograph entitled Lab 62-2S1 and 62-2S3 a photograph of that right glove?
I'm sorry, I might have confused the numbers. Could you say that again?
Sure. Well, this is a photograph of 62-2S1. So that would be the right glove, is that correct?
This is a photograph of 62-2,
Right.
the right glove.
And did you do a visual inspection of the right glove as well?
I did.
And can you just indicate to the jury what, if anything, you noticed about this particular glove?
I did notice some reddish staining near the base of the small finger and ring finger. I tested that area with a chemical screening test for the presence of blood, and I obtained a negative result. Therefore, that stain was not blood.
Similar to the left glove, did you do a swabbing of the interior of this glove?
I did.
And was that for touch DNA or wearer DNA?
Yes, it was.
And was that designated as 62-2S1?
62-2S1, that is correct.
And similar to the last item, you have a notation of that with an arrow indicating that you swabbed the interior of the glove. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
And since it's displayed in this photograph, I'm going to just jump ahead to 62-2S3. What was that a swabbing of?
Sample 62-2S3 was a swabbing of some of the stitching on the wrist closure. That area I tested with a chemical screening test for the presence of blood. I obtained a positive result indicating the presence of blood.
And is that area that you swabbed displayed in this particular photograph and outlined?
Yes, it is. It is outlined in red, the wrist closure, tip of the wrist closure stitching.
That's where the mouse is that correct?
That's correct.
And I want to direct your attention now to a swabbing 62-2S2. What was that a swabbing of?
I observed reddish-brown staining on the back of this glove on the Husky logo, identically to the left glove. The reddish-brown staining I tested with a chemical screening test for the presence of blood. I obtained a positive result indicating the presence of blood. I collected a sample from that logo area and designated it as 62-2S2.
And just to be clear, in this particular photograph, that is the lower right-hand portion of the photograph, which designates the area for the swabbing designated 62-2S2. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And is the reddish-brown substance that you observed visible in this photograph?
Yes, and I circled it in red pen.
This area here?
Correct.
And you actually took one additional swabbing of the right glove. You did 4 swabbings of the right glove. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I did.
And so I want to talk to you now about what you designated as 62-2S4 as a swabbing. What was that of?
It was reddish-brown staining on the right glove the stitching on the wrist closure again, but the back side of the glove.
And I'm just gonna zoom in if I could and direct your attention to the bottom portion, left-hand side of this photograph. Does this photograph display the area that you swabbed and designated as 62-2S4?
Yes,
And that's this area here, correct?
it's the area of the stitching, correct.
Just going to publish a stipulation to the jury, Your Honor. This is State's Exhibit 103, specifically paragraph 8. State Police Exhibit 502I, seized from Hartford by Sergeant Kevin Duggan on May 31st, 2019, and identified as one white standard textile towel with blood-like substance contained within State Police Exhibit 502, seized from the scene, corner of Albany Avenue and Green Street, Hartford, Connecticut, was subsequently submitted to the Division of Scientific Services and designated as submission number 53. Did you perform any analysis on a sub-item of 53?
Yes,
What was that of?
I examined sub-item 53S3, which was designated as trace material from towel.
And just displaying the photograph entitled Lab 53S3-1, can you just explain to the jury what we're looking at here?
You're looking at a series of photographs I took during my examination of a hair-like fiber that was enclosed in 53-3.
And who actually recovered this particular fiber?
Christine Roy,
Okay, and so she ended up retaining it and then you analyzed it later?
yes.
Did you do any analysis of this particular fiber or hair to determine what exactly it was?
I did.
And what was it?
I determined that this hair-like fiber was in fact a human hair.
And you had mentioned that you have some training in this area. Can you just walk the jury briefly through the process for how you make a determination as to whether or not something is human origin?
Yes. When I obtain trace material, a packet from an item of evidence, it may contain anything that we designate as trace material. It could be a hair, a fiber, glass, soil, mineral matter. All of this is contained within the trace collection. I remove anything that I believe is hair-like, and I separate it out. I intend to examine that item microscopically. The questions I ask myself really are, is this a hair? Is this a human hair or an animal hair? If it's a human hair, does it have a root? And does this root have tissue-like material on the end, meaning a piece of follicle perhaps, that could be sent for nuclear DNA analysis? So in order for me to understand what I'm looking at, I microscopically examine each and every hair-like fiber. I place each hair-like fiber on a glass microscope slide, add a little bit of water, and put on a glass cover slip. I want to document the length of that hair-like fiber, the color it may be, and the texture. Is it curly, hairy, straight, or curly, wavy, straight? And then I proceed to perform a microscopical analysis. When it's on the glass microscope slide and I put it on a microscope with a light source that comes from below, the light is transmitted through the sample and I can see the interior of that hair-like fiber. And it's that morphology that I can observe that helps me determine whether or not it's a human hair or an animal hair. Again, I will set any animal hairs aside. When I then proceed to look at this human hair and ask myself, does it have that root? If it has a root, again, I photo document all along as I'm going. I photo document that root and ask myself, does that root have any type of follicular tissue-like material on it? If it does, I may choose to lop off that root with a sterile scalpel and put it into a sterile tube for nuclear DNA analysis. I also maintain the shaft of that human hair for potential mitochondrial DNA analysis down the road.
And so this particular hair you determined to be human in origin, and you ended up forwarding this to the DNA lab, is that correct?
I forwarded the root portion of this human hair to the nuclear DNA section.
This is State's Exhibit 104, Your Honor. Specifically, paragraph 9, State Police Exhibit 363, seized from the Toyota Tacoma by Detective Matthew Riley on August 27, 2019, and identified as one interior door panel from right door, was subsequently submitted to the Division of Scientific Services and designated as Submission 99. Now, Ms. Velonis, you did not actually examine Submission 99 yourself. You examined trace material from Submission 99, is that correct?
That's correct.
Christine Roy did the initial examination of 99.
Correct.
And she identified trace material that was either hair or fiber-like object and designated as 99S14, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And I'm just going to display within the folder State Police Exhibit 363, Lab Submission 99S14, specifically a photo Lab 99S14.1. Was this the item that Ms. Roy found?
This was one of the items in the trace collection that she found, yes.
And specifically, this was designated as 99S14. And did you go through the same process in that you attempted to determine whether or not it was human in origin?
Correct.
And did you determine that it was?
I did.
And was that forwarded to DNA?
It was the root portion of that hair.
Reading from States 104, paragraph 10. State Police Exhibit 364, seized from the Toyota Tacoma by Detective Matthew Riley on August 27, 2019, and identified as carpeting cut from right floor, was subsequently submitted to the Division of Scientific Services and designated as Submission 100. Did you examine Submission 100?
I did,
And would you recognize photographs of Submission 100?
yes.
I'm just going to begin by opening the folder entitled State Police Exhibit 364, Lab Submission 100. And I'm going to open the photograph Lab 100.1 top side. Can you just tell the jury what we're looking at here?
It is submission number 100, and it consists of two pieces of carpeting. The first larger piece of carpeting that is displayed on the bottom, I designated as sub-item 100-1 and named it a brownish portion of vehicle interior carpeting. On top of that lies a smaller mat, which I designated as 100-2, and named it one vehicle floor mat.
And now I'm gonna display lab 100.1 bottom side.
Yes, that is the bottom side of sub-item 100-1.
So you essentially took it, flipped it over, took a photograph of that side as well, correct?
Correct.
And specifically with respect to 100-1, the vehicle carpeting itself, did you take any swabbings of it?
I did.
And specifically, what areas did you swab?
This is an image of a part of the sub-item 100-1. It has the floor mat removed from it. I tested various areas of this carpeting. One of the areas that I tested gave me a positive result with a chemical screening test for the presence of blood, indicating the presence of blood. And that area is shown on this photograph and designated as 100-1S1.
And so, just so the record is clear, this photograph, there appears to be almost a grayish outline in a circular pattern near the upper portion of the photograph. Is this the area that you are referring to?
Yes, it is.
And so based on that result, did you send 101S1 to the DNA unit?
Yes, I did.
And you took a second swabbing of this as well, is that correct?
That's correct.
And is that also shown in this photograph?
It is.
The area that was swabbed? And is that in the upper left-hand portion of the photograph?
It is. It's closer to what appears to be a tear in the carpeting. I tested that area as well with a chemical screening test for the presence of blood and obtained a positive result. I collected a swabbing of that sample, designated it as 100-1S2, and forwarded that sample to the DNA unit.
And then with respect to the underside or the vehicle floor mat, rather, this is a photograph lab 100.2, and this is the item that you designated as lab submission 100-2, is that correct?
Correct.
And did you do any screening tests on this particular item?
I did.
And what were the results?
I swabbed the top side and the bottom side. I also actually sliced it open to expose the interior of this mat, tested both sides, the inside of this mat, and all of the testing that I performed was negative with a chemical screening test for blood. Therefore, blood was not identified on this item.
And so consequently, no swabbings were taken that were forwarded to DNA from this particular submission.
That's correct.
Okay, the time is now 11:16. Madam Clerk, we are going to stand in our morning recess.
This honorable Superior Court is now opening back in session. Good morning, Your Honor.
Please be seated. Thank you. We will wait for Attorney McGinnis.
If we can, thank you, Your Honor.
While we're waiting, I don't know if that's what Mr. McGinnis is doing, but I'll note that I was given a very large, almost 600-page download from the lab, and I believe the witness has certain documents that were not in that. So I think he's either looking to download it for me, or at the lunch recess, I think they'll just make a color copy. It's like 4 or 5 pages, but it's something I would be asking about. I didn't know she had the actual images with her. Just letting the court know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
You're welcome.
I'm ready to proceed, Judge.
Yes. Would counsel stipulate, please?
Yes, Judge.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Philonis, I wanted to pick up with a different submission if I could.
Yes.
So I'm just going to read a stipulation to the jury. This is from States 103, specifically paragraph 2. State Police Exhibit 502A, seized from Hartford by Sergeant Kevin Duggan on May 31st, 2019, and identified as one clear plastic bag with blood-like substance contained within State Police Exhibit 502, seized from the scene, corner of Albany Avenue and Green Street, Hartford, Connecticut, was subsequently submitted to the Division of Scientific Services and designated as submission number 50. Ms. Philonis, you did not work on submission 50, but you did examine trace material that was seized from submission 50. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I'm just going to open the folder, State Police Exhibit 502A, Lab Submission 50, and specifically the photograph entitled Lab 50S11. Can you just indicate to the jury what we're looking at here?
This document displays a series of images from submission 50S1. It is the hair-like fiber that I designated as hair-like fiber number 1.
And did you do an analysis to determine whether or not this was human in origin?
I did.
And what was your determination?
I determined that this was, in fact, a human hair with tissue-like material at the root portion.
And so was this, was the root portion of the hair submitted for DNA analysis?
It was.
And was that submitted as submission 50S1-1?
Yes.
Paragraph 3 of that same stipulation, Your Honor, states 103, State Police Exhibit 502B, seized from Hartford by Sergeant Kevin Duggan on May 31st, 2019, and identified as one clear plastic bag with blood-like substance contained within State Police Exhibit 502, seized from the scene, corner of Albany Avenue and Green Street, Hartford, Connecticut, was subsequently submitted to the Division of Scientific Services and designated as Submission 51. And Ms. Valonis, once again, you did not examine Submission 51, but you did examine an item which was removed from Submission 51, is that correct?
That's correct.
And can you just describe the item for the jury?
The item that I received, item number 51S1, was trace material from poncho, as it was labeled within the laboratory.
And I'm just going to display in the folder State Police Exhibit 502B, Lab Submission 51, the photo entitled Lab 51S2. What's being displayed here?
I'd like to make a correction. I was looking at the wrong worksheets.
Oh.
This was 51S2, hard whitish material with reddish brown staining crust.
And did you take any action with respect to this item?
I did.
What did you do?
The first thing I did was remove any of the reddish brown material from this item of evidence. There was also a hair-like fiber attached to this item of evidence. And Christine Roy, who examined the mother item, asked me to just photograph it without the reddish brown staining for documentation purposes. Later on, I was tasked to prepare it to be outsourced to another laboratory. That's when I took off the hair-like fiber, the reddish brown material.
And I'm displaying photograph Lab 51S2. What is this?
Yes, that is how the trace evidence came into my possession. It was packaged within a white paper fold labeled 192984 51S2 CMR, which Christine Roy's initials. She placed that white paper fold into what we call a trace tin. The trace tins help protect any items of evidence that are within it. So that is how it came to me. The samples I collected from this evidence was actually, the hair-like fiber was actually determined to be a blue fiber. I did swab up the reddish-brown stainings, and at that point I just collected and did not test. And there was also some reddish-brown debris within that paper fold. So each of these items I retained separately.
And so your analysis was that the hair-like fiber was simply a blue fiber, I
A
believe?
blue fiber.
I'm just going to read the stipulation, paragraph 4. State Police Exhibit 502C, seized from Hartford by Sergeant Kevin Duggan on May 31st, 2019, and identified as one yellow and green kitchen sponge with blood-like substance contained within State Police Exhibit 502, seized from the scene, corner of Albany Avenue and Green Street, Hartford, Connecticut, was subsequently submitted to the Division of Scientific Services and designated as Submission 54. Now, Submission 54 you analyzed yourself, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And would you recognize photos of that submission?
Yes.
I'm going to open up the folder entitled State Police Exhibit 502C, Lab Submission 54. And within that folder, a photograph entitled Lab 54. Could you just indicate what we're looking at in this photograph?
This document is two photographs of a, what we call it, I called a scrubber sponge, yellow colored, with a green scrubber area, both sides of the sponge.
And did you notice any reddish-brown staining on this sponge?
I did.
And so did you take any action with respect to the reddish-brown staining?
Yes, I did.
What did you do?
I located a reddish-brown stain along the short edge of this sponge. I tested that stain with a chemical screening test for the presence of blood, which gave me a positive result, indicating the presence of blood. I collected that stain and labeled it 54S1, stain on sponge along short edge.
And I'm displaying now a photograph entitled Lab 54S1 and 54S2. Directing your attention to the upper right photograph. Is that the general area where you collected swabbing 54S1?
Yes, if you look at the left top photograph, you can see that I've labeled S1 with a line to the reddish brown stain. The top right photograph is a photograph of the sponge and the stain after I removed the stain.
And did you notice additional reddish brown staining on the sponge?
I did.
And did you swab that particular area as well?
Well, I collected another reddish brown stain close to the short edge of that sponge. I obtained a positive result with a chemical screening test for the presence of blood, indicating the presence of blood. I collected that stain and labeled it 54S2 and named it stain on sponge near short edge.
Yeah, and perhaps I stand corrected, you actually submitted the material itself for DNA analysis, is that correct?
I did.
Okay, and so it's not, you didn't swab it, you actually cut a piece of the sponge and put that in the tube for DNA analysis, is that right?
That's correct.
So I just want to direct your attention now to the bottom left-hand photograph. Is that the area where you removed 54S2 where your scissors are pointing here?
Yes.
Okay, and then to the right, at the end of the arrow depicted in the photograph, is that what you removed from the sponge and designated as S2?
Yes.
And then you took one additional swabbing of this sponge, is that correct?
Yes.
I'm going to display a photograph, Lab 54S3. And directing your attention specifically to the bottom of this photograph, can you just tell the jury what we're looking at here?
We are looking at two photographs are on this page. The bottom photograph shows the side, one of the sides, the long side, one of the long sides of this sponge.
And is the area that you designated as swabbing 3 depicted in this particular photograph?
Yes. However, the swabbing 54S3 was not only the edge long side of this sponge, it was also the top side of the yellow portion of the sponge. So all of the yellow sponge area, avoiding the reddish brown stains, was collected and labeled as 54S3.
And so I'm now displaying Lab 54 again. This shows the entirety of the yellow area, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you avoided the areas which you had previously collected for additional testing, is that right?
And any additional reddish brown staining I might have noticed, yes.
And were all of those swabbings submitted for DNA analysis?
Yes, it was.
And I'm saying swabbings, but again, there were 2 cuttings as part of that group.
Yes.
Okay. Just going to publish the stipulation, paragraph 5. State Police Exhibit 502D, seized from Hartford by Sergeant Kevin Duggan on May 31st, 2019, and identified as 1 black rubber and fabric glove with dirt-like substance contained within State Police Exhibit 502, seized from the scene, corner of Albany Avenue and Green Street, Hartford, Connecticut, was subsequently submitted to the Division of Scientific Services and designated as Submission 61. Ms. Valonis, did you work on submission number 61?
I did.
And I'm just going to open the folder entitled State Police Exhibit 502D, Lab Submission 61. And I'm going to display the photograph entitled Lab 61S1 through 61S3. Ms. Velonis, can you just indicate for the jury what we're looking at here?
This is a black, light-duty gardening type glove as I described it. It has fabric on the back and a sort of rubber-like palm and finger area.
And I want to direct your attention specifically to submission 61S1, swabbing interior palm side wear DNA. What particular area did you swab?
I swabbed the interior rubber side, the palm side of this glove. The swabs that we use have 6-inch sticks, so the swabs are very long. So we're able to reach into the glove area and collect a sample for wearer DNA.
Does that also include the fingers?
Yes, it does.
And I don't think I asked you that for the Husky gloves. Were you also examining the finger areas of the gloves on those?
Yes,
Okay. And again, this was for wearer DNA, meaning that you did not test this particular area for blood. Is that correct?
that's correct.
You took additional swabbing, specifically 61S2. Could you just indicate what that was?
61S2 was an area, a sample from an area from the cuff edge on the palm side of the glove. As you can see in this photograph, there is some soiling on this glove, but there is less soiling in that area along the edge. So I proceeded to test that area with a chemical screening test for the presence of blood. I obtained a positive result indicating the presence of blood. And I chose to swab up that area and label it 61S2 and forwarded that to the DNA unit.
And the area that you designated as 61S2, that is outlined here in the photograph in red, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, there appears to be, for lack of a better term, 2 red boxes on the bottom of the glove. 61S2 would be the bottom red box, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. And now with respect to 61S3, we see that is the area designated above 61S2, is that correct?
That's correct.
And what type of swabbing did you do for that?
I also tested that area with a chemical screening test for the presence of blood, and I obtained a positive result indicating the presence of blood. Therefore, I took an additional swabbing and labeled that 61S3 for DNA analysis.
And now I'm going to display the photograph, Lab 61S4 and 61S5. Beginning with the top photograph, could you just indicate to the jury 61S4 was a swabbing of the interior palm side, is that correct?
That's correct. I took 2 additional swabbings. The top image indicates that I took an additional swabbing from the palm side, interior of the glove. I wanted to take a better, more complete sample, so I turned that glove inside out and swabbed the palm side for DNA analysis.
And then with respect to 61S5, which is denoted in the bottom photograph here?
Yes, 61S5 was simply a swabbing of the interior back of the hand, interior back of the hand for DNA analysis.
So no screening test done on that, is that correct?
That is correct.
I'm going to publish paragraph 9 of State's Exhibit 103. State Police Exhibit 502J, seized from Hartford by Sergeant Kevin Duggan on May 31st, 2019, and identified as one red and black bent broom/mop handle with blood-like substance on the black handle contained within State Police Exhibit 502, seized from the scene, corner of Albany Avenue and Green Street, Hartford, Connecticut, was subsequently submitted to the Division of Scientific Services and designated as Submission 55. Ms. Valonis, did you work on submission number 55?
Yes, I examined that item of evidence.
And I'm just going to pull up a photograph in the folder State Police Exhibit 502J, Lab Submission 55, Lab 55, paren RBL stain. Ms. Valonis, I'm going to zoom in. Can you just indicate to the jury what we're looking at here?
That is the end of this mop/broom handle. I call that the black cap end. And on the black area, I noted some reddish brown stains, one of which was located on the cap. When I examined this, I just simply photographed it at this point and did not do any testing at this time.
And why didn't you do any testing?
This was also requested to be examined by the latent print area, so I didn't want to disturb that particular stain at that time. I noted where it was, and I continued my examination.
And did you eventually receive submission 55 back?
Yes,
And when you received it back, was it in a different condition?
it was.
How did it appear?
It was covered with latent print examination dust or powder, so it had a different appearance altogether.
And I'm just going to pull up the photograph entitled Lab 55S2 through 55S4. Ms. Valonis, I'm going to ask that you look at this photograph. Is this a photograph, or I suppose it's 3 separate photographs, but do these images show the broom or the mop as you received it back?
Yes,
Okay, and I believe you can see the dust in these particular photographs from the fingerprint analysis that wasn't present earlier.
correct.
All right. Now, did you take any swabbings of reddish-brown deposits from this particular item?
I did,
And is the area that was swabbed displayed in one of these photographs?
yes.
Okay, would you just indicate which one?
The top left photograph displays the interior broken end of this mop handle. Within that interior area, I noted reddish-brown deposits. I tested a portion of that reddish-brown deposit with a chemical screening test for the presence of blood and obtained a positive result. So I collected a portion of those deposits as 55S2 and forwarded that sample to the DNA area.
And in the bottom left-hand photograph, 55S3,
55S3 was the stain that we previously viewed. Now it's covered with the fingerprint powder, but I did collect that stain, tested it, a portion of that stain, with a chemical screening test for the presence of blood, and I obtained a positive result indicating the presence of blood. So I collected that stain as 55S3 and forwarded it to the DNA area.
and the bottom right image, 55S4.
The bottom right image depicts the exterior of the broken end of this mop or broom type handle. There was a staining, reddish brown staining on the exterior. I tested a portion of that staining with a chemical screening test for the presence of blood and obtained a positive result, therefore indicating the presence of blood. I collected that stain and labeled it 55S4 and forwarded it to the DNA area.
Now I'm going to display a photograph from that same folder entitled Lab 55S5. And actually, this photograph displays 9 separate images. I'm going to direct your attention to the image in the middle, on the right-hand side in the middle row. Could you just indicate to the jury what we're looking at?
We're looking at the entire item of evidence, which was a broom/mop handle, which, as you can see, was bent in 2 places. I collected a swabbing for touch DNA analysis from the entire red barrel of this handle and labeled it 55S5.
And no screening test done on this, it was just forwarded to DNA, is that correct?
That's correct.
I'm going to publish paragraph 10. State Police Exhibit 502K, seized from Hartford by Sergeant Kevin Duggan on May 31st, 2019, and identified as 4 pieces of black plastic garbage bag with black duct tape attached to 2 pieces contained within State Police Exhibit 502, seized from the scene, corner of Albany Avenue and Green Street, Hartford, Connecticut, was subsequently submitted to the Division of Scientific Services and designated as Submission 88. Now, you used a phrase earlier, and if I could borrow it, you did not work on the mother exhibit of Submission 88, is that correct? Or at least with respect to 88-1.
That's correct.
But there were items found by Mr. Parisi in fingerprint analysis that you subsequently analyzed, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. So I'm going to open the folder entitled State Police Exhibit 502K Lab Submission 88. There's a subfolder entitled 88-1. Specifically, what item did you analyze from 88-1?
I examined an item of evidence labeled 88-1-1, and it was named green/yellow sponge located inside untorn bag.
And just to be clear, this was a different sponge than the sponge we discussed earlier, which was a different lab submission entirely, is that correct?
That's correct.
So I'm going to open the photo entitled Lab 88.1.1S1. Is this submission number 88-1-1?
Yes, it is.
And did you take any action with respect to this?
I did.
What did you do?
I examined this looking for any reddish-brown stains on this sponge, and I did not observe any reddish-brown staining on this sponge. There was a darkish stain on this sponge, which I tested with a chemical screening test for the presence of blood, and it was negative. I did collect a swabbing of this sponge for touch DNA analysis, and I labeled that swabbing as 88-1-1S1, swabbing of, and named it swabbing of sponge all sides.
And did you collect any trace evidence from this sponge?
I did. I located a hair-like fiber within the green side of the sponge and retained it as 88-1-1S2 for further analysis.
And I'm now displaying the photograph entitled 88.1.1S2. And I'm going to ask if I could just direct your attention to the bottom photograph or bottom image. Does that image show the hair-like fiber that you collected?
Yes, the hair-like fiber is there, and also a portion of other trace materials.
So if we could just draw a distinction between the two, is the other trace materials in the center top of the particular image?
Yes, it is.
And so the hair-like fiber that you collected is to the left side of the image and underneath that, is that correct?
Yes, it's above the 1 to 1.5 centimeter of the ruler.
And this was also similar to the hairs that you discussed earlier. Did you analyze this particular hair-like fiber to determine whether or not it was of human origin?
Yes, I did.
And what was your conclusion?
I determined that it was indeed a human hair, and it had a root with tissue-like material on the root.
And did you go through the same process in terms of putting it under a microscope and things of that nature?
Yes, I examined it microscopically, photographed it as per protocol, and took my sample, meaning I took the root portion of the hair from the shaft and forwarded that to DNA.
And within submission 88, there was also a submission designated as 88-3, is that correct?
Yes.
And what was submission 88-3?
88-3 was designated as a torn black plastic bag with knot and black tape. I believe the latent print unit designated it as one torn black plastic bag tied in a knot on one side, black tape attached to the bag, RB stains on bag,
And what does RB stand for?
reddish brown.
And I'm going to open the folder, the subfolder 88-3. You had mentioned that Latent Prints analyzed this particular bag. Did they have an opportunity to analyze this bag before or after you did?
Both.
Okay.
They opened it up and they observed the reddish brown stains. I believe they didn't want to do anything to those stains, so they packaged it back up and sent it to me for examination. So I knew I had to return that item of evidence to them eventually.
And did you take any, well, firstly, I'll just display the photograph entitled Lab 88.3 Paren Interior. Can you just indicate what we're looking at here?
That is the black plastic bag interior, and I have two areas designated. The top left says duct tape B, and it points to a portion of black duct tape. I know it's difficult to see in this photograph. The lower right-hand markings that I've applied to this photograph says duct tape A, and it also has a line drawn to a separate portion of duct tape attached to this bag.
And just to be clear here, this is an image of the interior of the bag, meaning that you sort of, well, how did you show us the interior of the bag? Did you pull it out, or what did that look like?
Well, it came to me in a certain fashion, and as received, there was an exterior and an interior. So this is the interior of the bag as I received it. So I took the bag and turned it inside out to photograph the duct tape.
I'm going to show a photo Lab 88.3. Does this image depict the exterior of the bag as you received it?
It does. The bag opening is on the bottom of this image, so you might have to think upside down at this point, but the bottom is at the top and the top is at the bottom.
All right, so just to be clear, I have the benefit of the mouse here. This is actually here, the opening of the bag. Is that correct, what I'm circling?
That's correct.
And then this would be the bottom of the bag?
Correct.
Now, was this eventually submitted back to Latent Prints?
After I performed some analysis, yes.
Okay, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about, the analysis that you did. You took some swabbings of this particular item, is that correct?
Yes.
And I'm going to display the photograph Lab 88.3S1 and 88.3S5. Prior to giving it back to Latent Prints so that they could do their analysis, how many swabbings of this particular bag did you take?
I took 4 swabbings.
So I'm showing you an image, and I want to just direct your attention to the top image here, if I could. I see a designation S1 with a blue circle around a particular area of the bag. Can you just tell the jury what that is?
Yes. This bag was received with a knot in it, and I proceeded to loosen that knot a bit so that I could swab the knot area and as well as the internal surfaces of that knot. During that time, I observed a hair-like fiber that was entangled in this knot. So I removed that hair-like fiber. So the swabbing that I took from the interior of the knot, I labeled 88-3 S1 and named it swabbing of bag knot area. The hair-like fiber that I removed, I ultimately labeled as 88-3 S5 hair-like fiber, which I abbreviated as HLF, from knot area.
And did you do an analysis of that hair-like fiber to determine whether or not it was human in origin?
Yes, I did.
And did you go through the same process that we've already discussed?
Yes.
And what was your determination?
I determined that it was in fact a human hair with a root, and there was tissue-like material on the root end of that hair. I removed that root end and forwarded that root to DNA. I designated that root area as 88-3 S5.
And now I'm displaying a photograph, Lab 88-3S2 and 88-3S3. And so this particular image, once again, has the bag upside down, if you will. Is that fair to say?
Yes,
And so the opening of the bag is at the bottom, and the bottom of the bag is at the top here. Is that correct?
that's correct.
All right, I want to direct your attention now to the S2 and S3, beginning with S2. Can you just indicate for the jury what that designates?
S2 was a reddish-brown stained area, which I tested with a chemical screening test for the presence of blood and obtained a positive result indicating the presence of blood. I swabbed that reddish-brown staining onto swabs and called it 88-3 S2, and that's what you see. It says S2, it's sideways, and KM positive, which is our chemical screening test.
Was that swabbing submitted for DNA analysis?
Yes, it was.
And how about S3?
S3 again was a reddish-brown stained area, which I tested with a chemical screening test for the presence of blood. I obtained a positive result indicating the presence of blood. I swabbed up that staining, designating it as 88-3 S3, and forwarded it to the DNA area.
And now I'm showing you a photograph, Lab 88-3S4. What does this show?
These are 2 images of the 2 different duct tapes on the interior of the bag. The duct tapes were situated in such a way that they were folded over with a slight exposure of the sticky side. And I wanted to collect a sample from the sticky side of those pieces of duct tape. So both pieces of duct tape, I swabbed the exposed white sticky side for DNA analysis, and I designated that collection as 88-3 S4.
And so no screening test for blood was done on that particular swabbing, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, after you completed the 4 swabbings that we've just discussed on this particular item, was it given back to Latent Fingerprints for them to do their own analysis?
I did take one more sample. I labeled it 88-3S6, and those were a trace collection, hair-like fibers and other trace materials from the bag interior. So I collected those, labeled those, and set those aside. But after I collected the trace, I did forward this bag to the latent print unit.
Incidentally, you had mentioned that some of the areas that you swabbed had a red or a brown color, is that correct?
Yes, reddish brown staining.
Not visible in the photographs. How were you able to view them?
It was difficult because it is a black surface, but I saw some reddish brown staining, and I knew that I had to collect that sample prior to going to latent prints. I didn't want to lose it after they process it, maybe with their dust or however they process it. So it was my intention to make sure that I collected that staining before it might be more difficult to find it after their process.
And you eventually got the item 88.3 back from Latent Prints, is that correct?
Yes.
I'm just going to display the photograph, Lab 88.3 post LP. Excuse me, Your Honor. Can you just indicate to the jury what we're looking at here?
This is a photograph of the bag after it had been processed by the latent print unit. As you can see, it's in a different form right now. The knot has been unknotted per se, and I received it back in 2 separate portions. The main portion of the bag, and above that main portion of bag was a smaller portion of black plastic.
And so I want to just direct the jury's attention so we're clear. This is now the top of the bag where the mouse is scrolling back and forth. Is that correct?
Yes, the top is on the top side, correct.
And this portion here, which appears to be a oval or circular portion of plastic bag, you indicated that this was detached from the rest of the bag?
Yes, it is.
And so after this, did you perform any additional swabbing when you received it back in this condition?
Yes, I did.
I'm just going to pull up the photo, Lab 88 3S7. And can you just indicate to the jury what we're looking at here?
Those are 2 separate images of the exterior of the bag, one side of the bag, and I flipped it over and photographed the other side of the bag, both being the exterior of the bag.
And is the area that you swabbed and designated as swabbing number 7 displayed here?
It is.
And I'm just going to direct your attention now to the left-hand side of the plastic bag in the top image, which appears to be near the opening. There appears to be a blue outline. Is that the area that you swabbed?
Yes, I designated on that image the approximate area that I swabbed on the exterior of this bag for touch DNA analysis.
And similarly, the bottom?
Yes, correct. I swabbed the exterior opening of the bag for DNA analysis.
And now I'm going to show you a photograph, Lab 88 3S7 paren 2. What does this show?
That shows the separate portion of the black plastic bag as I received it from the latent print unit.
And did you swab this as well?
Yes. I swabbed both sides of that black portion of plastic bag as S7 as well. May I take a moment to review my notes?
Certainly.
So I want to be clear that S7 was a swabbing of both sides of this piece of black plastic bag, as well as the opening, interior and exterior of the bag, collected all together as one swabbing and designated as S7.
And that included this area here, the detached portion of the bag, is that correct?
Yes,
And you swabbed both sides of this as well?
yes,
Okay. Ms. Dulos, do you have gloves?
I do.
Okay. Ms. Dulos, I'm approaching with what has been already entered into evidence as State's Trial Exhibit Number 53, specifically a bag labeled Submission 88-003. And I'm just going to ask if you wouldn't mind just looking at the contents of that bag and telling me what it is.
It is the black plastic bag and piece of plastic bag that I examined, labeled 88-3,
Judge, would it be all right if the witness step down briefly?
Yes.
with the item of evidence?
Yes, yes, ma'am. And I'm going to ask, would you mind just, and I can take this, would you mind just fanning out the bag and just indicate to the jury, and I can help you if you need.
If I ask counsel to stand back just a little so I don't have to stand over by this table, so I can't see what's
I
going
can
on.
pass them.
Oh, okay.
Is this all right, Attorney Shaw?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is indeed the black plastic bag that I examined. As you can see, the area that I tested and collected, the reddish-brown stains labeled S2 and S3 are marked on this bag with a silver marker. My initials are also within those circles. The swabbing that I took, that I designated as S7, was approximately the edge of the black plastic bag, interior and exterior, as well as the black portion of the bag.
So this top area here, the interior and exterior, would have been swabbing 7, is that correct?
Yes,
Along with the separate piece?
yes. Well, imagine that the bag was knotted and someone may have been handling this bag as I imagined as I examined my evidence, that perhaps the bag was knotted and someone would be touching or carrying this bag. And that was my thought process in collecting that sample.
Thank you.
Yes.
If I could just have a moment, Your Honor. I have nothing further, Judge.
Thank you.
May I just return the exhibits to the...
Yes.
Ms. Vonis, just a couple of areas I just want to go over with you. A lot of questions I asked your colleague, Ms. Roy, who was here yesterday, correct?
She was here yesterday.
You
yes.
saw her yesterday?
Yes.
And you saw me talking to her and you yesterday, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to clarify just a few items. You talked about doing screening tests for blood, correct?
Correct.
And you used mostly, was it the Kastle-Meyer for that?
Yes.
You said a number of times that it is a screen for the indication of the presence of blood, and then you said it concluded that it indicated the presence of blood. You remember saying that?
I said it's a chemical screening test for the presence of blood. If it's a positive result, it indicates the presence of blood.
Didn't you mean to say it indicates the possible presence of human blood?
The word indicates means possible.
Okay, that was what I wanted to clarify with you, possible blood, and that's why that might be one reason you would send an item on to DNA to have it confirmed, correct?
Correct.
Did you do any, withdrawn, there are confirming blood tests, correct?
There are.
And the lab has them, right?
Yes, they do.
There is a way for you to use a confirmatory blood test to actually be able to say, yes, this was human blood, correct?
Yes.
You were very careful to keep, and I think your testimony made clear, each item separately, correct?
Yes.
Anything that you examined, you didn't have 3 or 4 of them strewn about on the table at the same time,
Correct.
or even near each other at the same time, correct?
Correct.
And you use gloves when you touch items, correct?
Yes.
Not just here in court, but in the lab, right?
Yes.
You want to make sure there's no cross-contamination, right?
Correct.
And before you got the item, you don't even know who was touching those items, do you?
No, I do not.
You also don't know whether there was any cross-contamination of any of the items that were part of what you referred to as 88-1, correct?
I received items as evidence as I received them. I know nothing about how they were processed or handled prior to that.
Okay, well, interestingly, I'm going to show you what has been previously filed in this case. It's, let's see if I find the exact. It's from Exhibit 42, Folder 4, Item 7. I'm just going to show you an image, and I just want to make sure, this is not how you would examine, or store the items. It takes about, I guess, 10 seconds for this to, if you would look at that screen. This is not how you would store the items that you are examining, is it?
Well, I just object, Your Honor. I mean, it's vague and
Well, the question is, would you store items as they would appear in a trash can on a city street? The answer is obvious.
Yeah, it's an obvious answer, but what would the answer be?
Clearly, I would not store evidence in a trash can on a city street.
Now, you don't know the items that you looked at. Were you even aware it came out of a trash receptacle on Albany Avenue at the corner of Green and Albany?
Yes.
But nobody ever showed you this image, did they? 4-272.
I've never seen this image before.
Is it fair to say that if this is how the items were in the receptacle, there might be some cross-contamination of the items as they were presented to you?
Yes, but I also need to mention that crime scenes are not forensic laboratories.
Exactly, right. You are doing the science, right?
Yes.
You are taking the items individually, correct?
I take them in as they are packaged by the submitting agency.
You do not take into consideration whether they might have been mixed up or even dumped together in another item, and so they would be easily transported before they came to you, correct?
I trust the submitting agency to perform their duties as they are trained, and I take in the evidence as it is presented to me.
All right, so you would trust them to handle it correctly, is what you're saying, right?
Yes,
So dumping everything from that barrel into one larger construction bag and bringing it someplace else, would that not be within the protocol as you understand it?
I don't see any alternative. Would you like them to spread out paper and go through this garbage can item by item on a city street?
Well,
I think I would personally also bag that, take it back to a secure location and sort through it.
Oh, but by doing that, you also agree that it would cross-contaminate any items that were in that barrel, correct?
It's a barrel of garbage.
I just want to ask you about Lab Exhibit 81-1-1S1, which was a sponge yellow and with a yellow side and a green side. You testified about that, correct?
Yes, please let me retrieve
course.
my notes. 88 dash,
88-1-1S1.
I'm sorry, what was that?
88-1-1S2 or 88-1-1.
Oh, hold on. You may be, no, 88-1-1.
Yes,
You have a document on that,
I do.
correct? When you were shown a different set of hair-like fiber, this was the yellow and green sponge that you, one of the two yellow-green sponges that you testified about, correct?
Yes, it was labeled yellow, green yellow sponge located inside untorn bag.
When you say the untorn bag, it's one of the two black bags that were part of 88-1, correct? Garbage bag.
I'm assuming so from the numbering, but I've not seen those other bags.
So when you obtained that item, the green, yellow sponge that we saw those pictures right at the end there, correct? At the end of your testimony on direct, I mean, correct?
Yes,
And I just want to make sure that we're talking about the same one, so I'm going to. Takes about 10 seconds for the machine to boot up. There it is. This is the item that you identified. This is from the state's exhibit. And it says Lab 88-1.1S1, correct?
yes, 88-1-1S1, swabbing of all sides.
And this item appears to be what I would call like a pot scrubber type of kitchen sponge. Is that
I
right?
call it a household or kitchen type sponge.
But one side is an abrasive, the bluish-green side is abrasive, right?
That's correct.
And the other side is a yellow, more absorbent side, right?
That's correct.
And it's like any of these, I can't think of a brand name, but the ones where, you can wash, the abrasive side you can use to remove maybe dirt or food items, and then you can use the other side for a more smoother finish, for want of a better way to describe it.
Yes,
You looked at both sides of this item, correct?
I looked at all sides of this item, correct.
And then you noted, well, first of all, was this item, the way it's labeled, was this inside the black garbage bag that you were talking about before on direct?
I received it individually packaged.
Do you know, did you discuss this with any of your fellow forensic colleagues as to how it became individually packaged?
I don't recall any conversation.
Did you have notes as to whether or not the latent print examiner removed this from the interior of the garbage bag?
Well, I would just object to the form of the question. There's multiple garbage bags here, and he was specifically asking her about the one we just saw in court, which is 88-3, which is a different bag.
Then I will rephrase the question. My apology. So you're aware that there was, you didn't see 88-3 in the courtroom, but you discussed 88-1, didn't you?
I'm sorry, repeat the question?
In your testimony, didn't you discuss 88-1, the garbage bag?
Judge, I'm just going to object. It mischaracterizes the testimony. We discussed 88-1-1, not 88-1.
Well, the court understands the designations as 80, whatever 80 we're using, -1, dash something else.
Oh, okay. Were there, let's just get this clear. You described there were 2 black garbage bags that were brought to the lab and designated as 88-1. Is that correct?
I don't believe I did.
You were asked to examine this sponge, correct?
Yes.
Where did it come from?
88-1-1.
Which is what?
Green yellow sponge located inside untorn bag.
Okay. Did you observe the untorn bag that it was removed from?
No.
Do you know who removed it from the bag?
I could look it up. Off the top of my head, it may have been the latent print examiner.
Okay, so we're back to...
Or Christine Roy, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
All right, one of them. It was done in the lab, though, correct?
I'm assuming so.
All right. So then I'm going to show you, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. The item that you're referring to as the hair-like fiber or the fiber is this curved item that we see in the bottom image. Is that correct?
Yes.
And since this is also on the same photograph, the top image is the bag it was presented to you in. Is that right?
That's the back side of the bag.
Right. And whose initials are that on the tape here?
I believe those are Kevin Parisi's.
And who again is Kevin Parisi?
He is the latent print examiner.
So does that then help indicate where this came from?
Yes,
Okay. And you opened it up, correct?
yes,
And then you examined this curved fiber item here, correct?
yes, it's a hair-like fiber.
And even though it's curved, it's about a half a centimeter in its curved shape from one point to the other end, correct? According to this image.
I documented it as approximately 0.7 centimeters in length,
Is that flattened, or did you actually measure the curve?
flattened.
Okay. So if this was a crescent, if we're just talking about the circumference, not the circumference, the diameter as a arc, it was about a half a centimeter, correct?
0.4,
And if you flatten it out, it's about 0.7, right?
correct.
Now, you said you did some microscopic analysis of this particular hair, is that right?
Yes,
And I understand you have some images with you that were not shown to the jury yet, is that correct, regarding this hair?
correct.
And could I see that report that you have there, please? And we'll make a copy, but I don't want it to, stop the questioning, because I only have a couple more questions about it. Is that it?
These are the images.
And I take it these are from the lab, correct?
Yes, I took those images at the laboratory.
All right, and then this is just your set, but it's from the original documents that the lab keeps, right?
Yes,
All right, so I'm going to mark this for ID with an understanding that I am only going to, we could replace this copy so the witness can have this back, but I'd like to mark these 2 images.
I have no objection.
But I would maybe, I don't know if we should not actually put the label on these, so we'll make a copy after the break.
They belong to the witness, so we should not label them.
Okay, but what, could I just have I'll just take,
You can use a sticky just to,
I'll use a paper clip with the ID on it for now. That'll. And for the record, this is going to be T and U, and I'm going to need some assistance just to turn on the Elmo because. Is the power on? Can't tell. Do I have to press that? Because it looks like it's on.
it's not on.
Oh, okay. So for the record, use this more in grade school, Your Honor.
Probably worked better then. So you can't just have 1 minute.
It's like film strips.
That should be it.
Do I press something else? Oh, perfect.
There you go.
And then okay, so we're going to call the top, you have 2 pages that are stapled together, correct?
Can we, the images is upside down. Is
Oh.
there
Well, how's that?
better?
Okay, so the one with the ruler on it, with the centimeters, we'll call T, and the next one will be U. How's that? So we're looking at 4 images on Exhibit T, correct?
Yes,
You took these 4 pictures, right?
yes,
And again, the hair we see somewhat enlarged in this image here, correct?
in the upper left image, yes.
Upper left, well, the way,
Well, as it's displayed on the screen.
yeah, I realize. So, all right, so as it's displayed on the screen, this is the real size of it?
Correct, that's taken, let's say, with the naked eye.
And this image, which is on the screen, which is I'll just identify it since it's turned, I don't know how to fix that, but there's some language written around this enlarged version. Would you just describe, first of all, what does this say?
There is a square that I drew on this image. This square is encompassing the root portion of the hair that I removed. So the square, and there is a line that leads to some writing. The writing says 88-1-1S2-1 with an asterisk, and it says 2 DNA. So that is the human hair, the root portion of the human hair with tissue-like material that I collected from the sponge, and I sent that to DNA. The other writing on that image says remaining shaft 88-1-1S2-1 RAL, which means retained at lab.
And that's your handwriting, correct?
Yes, it is.
And then the other two images, there is a blue square at the edge of the, what looks like the fiber here, is that correct?
The human hair, yes.
So you did by now determine it was a human hair, correct?
I did.
Okay, and then if we go over to this image here, is this a microscopic enlargement of the hair itself?
Yes, it's a low power microscope that I use to capture these images.
And this is the shaft part that you testified about?
In that image, there is a bracket, and the bracket has a number labeled 88-1-1S2-1 asterisk. Now, the bracket and the line leads to the other photograph. So I am depicting a magnified image of the same hair root in those two images.
Right, so in other words, this blue line here, it looks like it maybe has an arrow at the end. This is what you're referring to, right? This blue line that goes between those two images?
Yes, it's the same hair, the same human hair with tissue-like material at the root at different magnifications.
Okay, so now we're going to go to Exhibit U, which we're not going to put on your copy. It will be replaced with a color photocopy. So there are three images on U, correct?
Yes.
And would you just read what it says in the image? And I realize it's sideways, so I can either turn it. It's sort of counterintuitive, but all right. First of all, what does this image here, the one on the left top, indicate to you? What is it showing us?
It is a picture of the human hair after I removed the root with the tissue-like material. It is labeled on the photograph, root portion previously removed, with an arrow pointing to the end of that human hair.
And then this image to the right, what is this showing us?
The image to the right shows the tip of that human hair.
And what about this lower image here on the left here? What does that
So-
show us?
Lower left depicts a mid portion of the shaft of that human hair. These photographs are taken, the root end, the tip, the mid portion, for clearly photo documentation and review of the evidence by other examiners who review my work and testify that my work is accurate and complete.
In fact, everything you do has to be reviewed by another technical person, correct?
That's correct.
To make sure that what your conclusions are, what you wrote, there are no mistakes or typos or anything like that.
That I haven't gone rogue and gone off the SOPs, that I'm doing things according to the SOPs.
And just tell them what SOP means.
Standard operating procedures.
All right. And there are written procedures and training you go through in order to follow a certain procedure, right?
Correct.
And finally, could you just read what it says here at there's your handwriting below where it says 88-1-1S2-1. Just read what it says for the record, please.
After root portion removed, all photos 100x objective.
And 100x, is that 100 times enlarged?
Not necessarily.
Tell us what that means then.
The microscopes that we use for this image is basically your standard microscope that you might have used in high school, where you have the oculars that you look through, you see through a tube, and there are lenses at the bottom that you can rotate, sometimes smaller, less magnification to higher magnification. So I used the objective that was labeled 100x. Because I take a photograph, I'm not only going through the lenses of the microscope, but I'm also going through the lens of the camera. So I can't say that that's a true 100 times magnification of the object because of the lenses. And the camera that we use has a zoom feature. So we don't really know exactly how many times magnified that thing is.
In any event, this is magnified larger than the 0.4 centimeters of the original size, correct?
Correct.
You sent this over to DNA for examination, correct?
I sent the root portion of this hair to DNA for examination.
All right. And these are going to be my last couple of questions, so just bear with me for a moment. You talked a little bit about, you mentioned mitochondrial DNA and nuclear DNA in your direct examination, right? And you're not the DNA person on this case, correct?
That's correct.
That would have been, as far as you know, Kristen Medell, correct?
Correct.
But there is a difference between mitochondrial DNA and nuclear DNA, correct?
Correct.
When you're examining, well, mitochondrial DNA is from the mother side of the family or the maternal lineage, correct?
Yes.
And so therefore there would only be X chromosomes in it, right?
Yes.
But if, whether it's from a man or a woman, you'd still only get the X chromosome from mitochondrial
Well,
DNA.
I take that back. I don't want to go down that route because I think I misspoke.
Oh.
Mitochondrial DNA does not have X and Y chromosomes. So I would like to withdraw my answer and leave that to the DNA analyst.
All right, but in any event, you do know that mitochondrial DNA is from the mother side of the family, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And you know enough about biology to know that the mother side of the family doesn't have a Y chromosome, correct?
In nuclear DNA.
In any DNA, right? There's no Y chromosome.
Gonna object, Your
All
Honor.
right, I'll withdraw the question. I don't have any other questions.
Nothing further, Judge.
Thank you, Mr. Bailonis, you may step down.
Thank you.
May I have a moment with counsel for a moment? Your Honor, by agreement, the state is going to make a color copy of exhibits T and U, defense exhibits T and U, which I guess are admitted as full. I didn't hear if we were agreeing to
Oh,
that.
there was no offer yet.
Well, they were displayed to the jury, Your Honor. I
Yeah.
don't have an objection. Obviously, it was her work.
Right.
Thank you.
So offer is full.
Defenses T and U admitted as full.
But by agreement, for the benefit of the witness, the state's going to make a color copy, and the copies will be the exhibits rather than the witnesses, so she can have this back.
Thank you.
But I will leave it with the clerk, or should I give it to the state with the court's permission?
Well, probably just give it to the state. Are there any other witnesses the state intends to call?
Not today, Judge.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of your day. We plan to reconvene on Monday at 10 o'clock. Please have a safe weekend. Please do not discuss the case. Please follow no media about the case. Have a good afternoon.